Hi, I'm Simon. This video is all about creating Iron Man's iconic heads-up display using nothing other than HitFilm Express, which is completely free. When Jon Favreau and his team started designing the first Iron Man film, they ran into the superhero face issue. Hiding your actor's face for extended periods of the film makes it really hard for an audience to connect. That's why Spider-Man is always pulling his mask off at the first opportunity. With Iron Man, the solution was actually to magically see inside the helmet, which lets you see Robert Downey Jr.'s performance and also reinforces how cool the suit is. This is our starting point. From here we colour correct to give it a warmer look, and then we go seriously hot with some curves tweaks before applying a tracked mask to darken down everything except her face. The HUD is created using a mixture of animated elements, which are then arranged into the HUD design that you see in the movies. A whole bunch of grading is added to make it nice and glowy, and then it's composited back onto the face. None of this can happen if HitFilm doesn't know what the head is doing, so the first thing we need to do with a shot like this is track the movement of the face. There's a bunch of...
When compositing, it is often necessary to match the movement of effects or other assets to movement within your video footage. I'm Axel Wilkinson for HitFilm.com, and in this video, we will look at the tracking tools in HitFilm 3 Pro. I invite you to download the project files if you want to follow along. Matte paintings have been used successfully in film since the dawn of time, or thereabouts, especially to create wide establishing shots. But since they are just flat images, traditionally paintings, sometimes additional tricks are needed to give them depth. I'm Axel Wilkinson from HitFilm.com, and this tutorial is going to discuss converting 2D images into 3D environments to add depth to the scene. This helps sell the illusion that we are actually filming in the location and makes the whole scene more engaging and exciting. If you want to follow along, the zip file linked from this tutorial has all the resources you need. I will be using HitFilm 3 Pro, but most of this tutorial works perfectly in HitFilm 3 Express as well. So if you open the finished Canyon comp in the included project, the basic technique is easy to understand. We have cut the original image into several layers and repositioned these in 3D space. Then when we animate a camera move, the parallax of those layers creates an authentic illusion of depth in the scene. So let's rebuild it together. Right-click the Grand Canyon image and make composite shot, 10 seconds long. Note that this image is much larger in resolution than our finished HD comp, but that's good. Use the actual resolution of the image for now. This allows us to see the entire image at once while we mask out our separate layers. We want 5 layers here when we are finished, so select our image and Control-D to duplicate it, or Command-D on the Mac, until we have 5 copies in total. Now disable the top 3, rename the bottom one to Distance, this will be our background, and disable that layer as well. On our remaining visible layer, we are going to cut out this mesa in the midground, so rename this layer accordingly. Zoom in to 100%, then right-click to drag the view around until a good portion of our mesa is visible. Now, using the freehand mask tool, start drawing around the edge of the mesa. There isn't really any shortcut to this part, it's just a matter of placing a ton of mask points to accurately trace the edge of our selection. And we will repeat this step for each one of these layers, so you'll get a bit of practice at this. I'm speeding up the footage here so you don't get bored watching me do this. Masking a ton of layers out of an image like this takes some time, but it's a lot cheaper than a trip to Arizona. Most of us can't realistically afford to take a trip down to the Grand Canyon and capture this sort of shot. But a still image of the Grand Canyon is much easier to come by, and this technique makes for a remarkably affordable compromise. Okay, at this point we have the top edge of our first mask drawn. The bottom edge will be hidden by the layers in front of it, so just leave plenty of overlap and complete the mask shape. And there's our first mask. Now hide this layer, show the one above it, and we will repeat the process. Rename this one Forward Mesa, reposition the viewer as needed, and start drawing our mask. Same process, different layer. I'll skip ahead to when I finish this one as well. We need to rearrange our layers a bit to prevent this. The fact that our image is taller than our frame actually helps with this. First, select distance and drag it down as far as you can. Parent the branches to the foreground so they stay locked together, then move the foreground upward until the bottom edge is just out of frame. Now reposition the two mesas to create a pleasing composition in which each layer completely hides its counterpart in the distance layer. To create. Now all we need to finish off this shot is some grading. Add a grade layer and drag on the Desert Intensity preset. I find that to be a bit too intense though, so I'm going to just remove the exposure effect and keep the warm orange tones. Then in the clouds effect, set the speed to 0. Beautiful. Think for a moment about the gear you would need and the travel that would be required to film a shot like this, and you can really start to appreciate how useful this sort of technique is.
Last time Josh and Kirsty showed you how to build, light and shoot on a green screen. And today we're going to be talking about what you do once you get that footage back into the computer for compositing. Now the techniques we're talking about apply to any kind of green screen shoot, but I'm going to be specifically talking about this shot. Josh made this for the HitFilm 4 Pro launch and it's got a lot of cool stuff going on. Today I'm going to focus in on one specific aspect, which is how we got the guy inside the helicopter. First up, you need to remove the green screen background, or in this case the blue screen, which we used because Joffrey was wearing a green costume. This can be done in HitFilm Express as well as HitFilm Pro. Now the golden rule of any kind of green screen work is that you want to maximize the separation between your foreground and your background. That just makes everything easier. And for the sake of your own sanity, if you've got someone in a green costume, just don't shoot them in front of a green screen. Swap it out for a blue screen. HitFilm makes removing the green screen fast and easy. And once that's done, you can move on to the second stage, which is compositing the layer into your shot. This is a particularly cool example because it shows off HitFilm 4 Pro's unified 3D space, which makes it super easy to put layers in and around 3D models. There's no awkward masking or having to fiddle around with multiple layers and mats. You literally just put the guy in the helicopter. Okay, so let's get into it. We've uploaded a blue screen clip that you can download to try out the techniques for yourself, so check out the link on the info cards or down in the video description if you want to grab hold of that. We can't actually give away the helicopter that we used in this shot because that was purchased from turbosquid.com, but there's loads of great places that give away 3D models for free, which work really well in HitFilm, so check out places like tf3dm.com and foundation3d.com. There's a load of talented people that put their work up there, and you can just download it and try it out. After importing the clip, right-click it and create a new composite shot. This will set it up with the clip's properties all ready to go. So one of the cool new tweaks in HitFilm 4 Pro is that we've made the search box in the effects library a bit cleverer. So if I search for blue screen, it'll find anything related to that topic, even if the effect doesn't actually have that word in the name. So first up, we're going to look at the color difference key. So drag that one onto your clip. In the controls panel, make sure you switch the screen color from green to blue. Otherwise it's going to get confused with this particular shot because obviously we're using a blue screen. Now this is our simple keyer, which you can find in both Express and Pro, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it isn't awesome. The general workflow with this keyer is to first adjust the gamma to do your main removal. So I'm going to drop that down until the blue screen mostly goes away. Switching on the View Matte property makes it much easier to see exactly what's going on. And I can now tweak the min and max sliders to clean up some of the fuzz in the background and the foreground until we have this really nice clean matte. You can see that was just a few seconds to get that kind of quality key. Pro users also have the more advanced chroma key effect, so let's take a quick look at that as well. I'm going to remove the color difference key first and then drag on the chroma key. Opening this up reveals a much more advanced keyer with a ton of options. This is especially powerful for complex or challenging composites. I'm going to use the color picker here to select the blue behind Joffrey. Incidentally, Joffrey is one of our genius web developers. He came all the way from France to work with us, and he also happens to look pretty intense when you put him in military fatigues, which is, kind of handy for the stuff we film. Picking out that blue colour has got us a pretty great key right away, without even touching any of the other controls. In the effects view menu you can switch to the matte view, and then adjust the gain to get the key tuned in. Down in the matte controls you can then change the clip background and foreground to clean it up. It's a very similar process to using the colour difference key, and in this example that's kind of all you need to do. We don't need to use all the other settings this time round, but it's good to know that they're there for when you've been given a really tricky shot to work with. So if you find that the colour difference key isn't quite doing what you need, make sure you load in the chroma key and really go to town on it. So what about all this stuff that's around the edge of the blue screen? Well, that's where masking comes in. You'll note that this was all shot very carefully so that the parts of Joffrey that weren't in front of the blue screen barely move, his feet and his left hand. All the parts of his body which were moving extensively are in front of the blue screen, and that's going to save us a ton of time. Up in the viewer, select the pen tool and then click to start adding points to our mask. We're going to draw loosely around Joffrey. This can be a pretty rough and dirty mask because we know he's going to be composited inside a helicopter where you're not going to be able to pick up on the fine details. Once the mask is completed, it combines with the chroma key, resulting in a really clean key. You'll also note that adding the chroma key and the mask hasn't really affected performance at all. This will vary depending on your system, of course, but it's always useful when common techniques like this work in real time. Okay, let's move on to step 2. We've got our perfectly keyed actor, so what do we do with him now? Well, we can put him anywhere, such as in a helicopter. I'm going to keep this relatively simple, so I'm not going to be getting into how to set up 3D models and lights and cameras. What I've got here is a composite shot containing an animated helicopter sliding into frame. It's all ready to go, and we're going to put our freshly keyed Joffrey inside the back of the chopper. From the media panel, I'm going to find the composite shot containing the keyed clip and drag it onto the timeline. So there it is, now functioning as a simple 2D layer overlaid onto the chopper. I'll now switch the layer from 2D to 3D using the dimension selector on the timeline. Okay, but this is actually to be expected. You see, what's happened here is that the keyed layer has entered the 3D space as some kind of gigantic Frenchman. And if I switch out to the perspective view, you can see what's really going on, with Mega Joffrey towering over the helicopter. HitFilm, of course, doesn't know what kind of relative scale these layers should be to each other. So let's position and scale them up more appropriately. First up, still in the perspective view, I'm just going to slide the layer backwards until it intersects with the 3D model. If I move in for a closer look, you can see how the keyed video layer is moving through the 3D geometry. Okay, I'm going to shrink him down to about 4.5%. That seems to be about right compared to the scale of the helicopter. And I can now just move him around and position him into place inside the chopper. Now, because the 3D video layer exists in the same unified 3D space as the helicopter, doing this positioning is pretty easy and obvious. I can orbit around the helicopter if I need to get a better view of where it's going. An important step is to make sure that we parent the layers together, otherwise Joffrey has a horrendous accident as soon as we move the playhead. So on the timeline, I'm going to open up the keyed layers parent menu and select the chopper. This will lock the position of the keyed layer to the movement of the helicopter, just like that. Well, let's switch back to our camera view, and I'm going to turn my 3D lights back on. You can see we've ended up with Joffrey looking rather overlit. This is because he's being lit by the 3D lights in the scene, because the keyed layer is now a 3D object in that scene. To make him look more realistic, I'm going to go in and tweak his material properties. You can see that he currently has quite a high specular value, which basically means that the light is shining off the layer really brightly. And while Joffrey is a shining light of the HitFilm office, we don't really want that in this particular shot. So after dropping specular down, it looks a lot better, and I can then adjust the diffuse setting to get the exact brightness that matches the surroundings. One super cool benefit of how HitFilm text slots together is that the keyed layer can also receive shadows from the 3D helicopter. So if I turn on shadow rendering, you can see that as the rotor blades spin around, they cast a shadow onto the keyed layer. That's zero extra effort on my part as a compositor, but it really helps sell the realism of the shot. You can of course use additional effects to grade and blend layers together even further. The final shot mixes together a whole ton of other techniques. Okay, take a look at this. This is the shot I'm going to be talking about in my next tutorial. But in the meantime, the next video is going to be Josh and Kirsty talking about some practical tips on how to shoot with lightsabers. So that's continuing our month of celebrating Star Wars. Okay, subscribe if you don't want to miss it.
Today I'll be showing you how to create two effects from the movie Doctor Strange, which came out in November. First we'll take a look at the final effect, and then we'll jump straight into HitFilm to get to the tutorial. Hope you guys enjoy.
When you want to dissolve a layer or object into particles in HitFilm 2 Ultimate, atomic particles are the way to go. I'm Axel Wilkinson for HitFilm.com, and in this tutorial, we are going to look at how to use atomic particles to create a transition between titles. We'll be focusing on the underlying concept, then we'll look at several different title variations that are constructed around this concept.
Based on a true story. A scandalous lawsuit. A breach of promise. Even the simplest of men can break when pushed too far. A triumph of the good. And so it begins.